In a world of challenges and uncertainties, hope shines as a beacon, guiding us through the dark times and showing us the way to brighter days ahead. But what exactly is hope? Where does it come from? And how does it shape our lives? I'm Annie Bennett, and I'd love you to join me on this journey as I explore the meaning of hope. I'll delve into philosophical perspectives, personal stories, and scientific insights to understand the power of this elusive emotion. So whether you're seeking inspiration, comfort, or simply a deeper understanding of the human spirit, let's embark on this exploration together and discover the extraordinary power of hope. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Chronicles of Hope podcast with me, Annie Bennett. It's so lovely to be here. This podcast has been so many weeks in the making, and finally I'm here recording it, and it is just fabulous. Let me give you a brief history of me. I was a primary teacher for 30 years. I set up a cake business in 2014. In 2021, I finally retired from teaching, and I set up my training business for home bakers in 2020, which I now run full time, and I absolutely love it. Everything was all running along quite nicely until April this year, where the whole story of the Chronicles of Hope begins. Let me talk you through everything that had happened. So back in April, I went to see my GP after noticing a lump on my left breast. She then referred me to the hospital, and I had my first appointment there on Thursday, the 2nd of May. Now, let me tell you more about this one, because this appointment was quite significant. Firstly, I went on my own, which was a big mistake looking back on it. And my advice here to anyone going through similar is to make sure you take someone with you, because sitting alone in that hospital was very lonely and very overwhelming. I did that on subsequent appointments, and I really can't tell you what a difference it did make. So this first appointment involved a whole morning basically of being prodded and poked. It happens quite a bit that when you go for a cancer diagnosis. So the initial consultation and examination was followed immediately. I went down the corridor, if you like, to the mammogram, had one of those, and then went to the ultrasound department and had an ultrasound and also a biopsy. And it was a very long morning. There was a very long wait in between each of those. And I was sitting alone in corridors with other patients and staff moving about, going backwards and forwards. And as I've just said, I wish I'd taken someone with me because it was quite overwhelming. And even before I'd been told to change into a hospital gown for the biopsy, I felt really vulnerable. Now, those of you that know me know that that's not really a feeling I often feel. I don't often feel vulnerable. Generally quite a strong person. But in that circumstance, I really did feel vulnerable. And you sit in the hospital corridor and you wait for your name to be called. And when your name is called, your heart beats really quickly and your head goes a little bit fuzzy. And it was all in a bit of a whirl. So it was a really long morning, but it was also a really short morning. It's very strange. Now, the worst part of that morning, it has to be said, was the biopsy. It wasn't painful. It was very, very uncomfortable. I was asked to lie on my side with my arm over my head. So again, physically, I felt quite vulnerable, although at the same time, I felt quite safe because these people obviously know what they're doing and they were very caring. But, you do feel quite vulnerable in that position. So the consultant did an ultrasound and then she did the biopsy. Now, I'm not particularly squeamish. I'm not scared of needles, but I'm not that keen on looking at them. So if I'm having bloods taken or whatever, I won't necessarily look at it. And I was really glad I didn't for this biopsy because when I was done and I sat up and was ready to go, I saw the size of the needle. It looks like something you might tranquilize an elephant with. It really does. And the biopsy itself, as I said just now, it wasn't painful, but it was very uncomfortable and very alarming. So I was given an anaesthetic before the needle was inserted. I was told to expect a click. She said, you'll hear a loud click. And she really wasn't joking. It really did sound as if I was being stapled. And so she did 3 in my breast, and then she did 3 under my arm for my lymph nodes. And after she'd done all that, I felt really quite bashed about. And in fact, the bruises that I had stayed with me for quite a few days afterwards. But as I said, it didn't hurt. It was just really uncomfortable and slightly alarming because I didn't have anyone with me that I knew. Had I had that, it would have been a lot easier and a lot better. And after she'd done what she needed to do, after she'd done the biopsy, the consultant told me she'd send me for an MRI, as this would tell them, she said, which treatment I'd need for the disease. As I left the hospital, I was uncharacteristically quite tearful and quite overwhelmed by everything that had happened that morning. And her words of, the disease, treatment of the disease, kept circulating around my head. And it was at that point, really, that I went into a bit of a shutdown. In the following couple of weeks, I scaled right back a lot of activities that I'd planned to do. I was in the middle of rehearsing for a play. I didn't go to a lot of those rehearsals because I just felt I needed to come to terms with what was about to happen. I know some people, their coping mechanism would be to, dive fully into other activities and distract. But I was the opposite. I didn't want to distract from what was going on. And let me explain why. When you ever experience a trauma or a loss or life-changing news, you experience an emotional reactions in your body, and the shock often hits you as something physical in your body. And I've found in my life, when I've ever had this happen to me, when I've tried to distract myself, I can forget about it for however long. But then when I remember that thing has happened, the physical shock happens again. So what I really wanted to do was to just constantly think about it. And so it became my norm. So it became my constant and my present, if that makes sense. Over the next couple of days, I got used to it, and I would wake up thinking, yeah, okay, this is happening. And it wasn't a shock every time I thought about it. So looking back, I think I did the right thing with that. I had time to myself to come to terms with what was about to happen. So moving on in May, a few days after that initial appointment, I had an MRI scan. Now, if you've never had an MRI scan, it's very, very noisy. It's slightly alarming. It's not at all painful. I mean, it's not invasive. It's just slightly alarming. They do offer you radio or music. And I was asked, but it never came through my headphones. So they must have, I don't know, pressed the wrong button or something. But it didn't bother me. I just closed my eyes. I just sort of almost drifted off, really, because the noises almost became white noise. And I was in there for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes while they do all the scans. So that was the first scan, one of many. And then a couple of weeks later, my first appointment with the breast specialist. And this time I took a friend with me, a really good friend, one of my best friends, and he came and sat with me. And it was in that appointment that I was told I had grade 2 breast cancer and that I would need chemo, surgery, and radiation treatment. And I was also referred for more scans. Now, at that point, that wasn't a shock. I was okay. I felt comfortable hearing that. And I think that quite surprised the surgeon and the Macmillan nurse that was also sat in that appointment. The fact that I was, okay, yeah, tell me what I've got to do and we'll do it. Let's just get rid of this thing. And my attitude was very positive. And the Macmillan nurse particularly noted that. She said, you'll go a long way with that attitude. So I suppose in terms of hope, that was my first sort of glimpse into it. I wasn't feeling despair. I was actually feeling, okay, we can do something about this. So another couple of weeks, another CT scan, and then another couple of weeks. Everything's a couple of weeks with this. You have to wait a couple of weeks in between everything. So we're up to the 7th of June, had another appointment with the specialist, accompanied by my elder daughter. And the scan that I previously had didn't show anything, but he was going to refer me for something called a PET scan. And then about 10 days later, I went to see the oncologist for the first time, this time accompanied by my younger daughter. And he went through all the chemo routine. He told me about the drugs, he told me about the possible side effects, he told me what to expect, and went through all the paperwork for that. And then a couple of days after that, that's when I went to Brighton, where the PET scanner is. And I went to have the PET scan, which was a very long and drawn out procedure. So that was Monday, the 24th of June, I went for the PET scan. And on Monday, the 1st of July, so a week later, I had a call from the oncologist's office, asked me to go and see him the following day. And it was on that day, Tuesday, the 2nd of July, a date that shall be ever engraved on my memory, that I was told that the primary breast cancer I was diagnosed with had in fact spread to my bones. And he said, we can't cure that. It's not curable. And those were the words that went round and round my head constantly for the next couple of days. Those are the words that I had a physical reaction to. So my heart did this weird, heavy drop. I was breathless. I felt colder. I had a chill. And for seconds afterwards, I couldn't hear anything. Complete physical reaction to this. And it was my younger daughter who actually asked the question, how long? The inevitable question. But the oncologist said it could be years. So I hung to that. Again, another glimmer of hope in all this potential despair. He then went on to explain that it would be a change of treatment. I was expecting chemo and surgery and radiation, but he said, no, you're not having any of that now. You're going to be on a regime of drugs, letrozole to start with, and ribociclib, which was what I've started calling the headline drug that I take. That is the sort of alternative to chemo. It's not chemo, but it works as it, if you like. And so I was told that was the regime that I'd be on. So for a couple of days after that, my daughters and I, my two daughters, I've got Heather, who at the time was 23, and Eleanor, or Elfie, at the time was 20. We spent about 3 days almost cocooned, we almost hibernated. They helped me by phoning up friends and relatives and asking them to pass on the news to others, which was a really helpful thing to do. I felt on that Tuesday evening that it was just so overwhelming. I couldn't then go and phone people and say, hey, you know what? So we asked people to do it for us. We delegated, which was the best decision because they were more than happy to do that. And everyone understood why we were having to do that. And yeah, we just spent 3 or so days just getting used to the diagnosis, finding our way with it, and just being a bit numb and shocked by it. And it was on the Friday that we were driving somewhere to go and have a nice walk in a nice, environment, that my brain started to switch on to, right, well, I've got to do something here. I can't just crawl into a hole and feel sorry for myself. Those of you that know me know that's not my style at all. And I decided that actually I'd been given, although I'd been given a diagnosis of a life-limiting illness, what I'd also been given is a sense of power. I've actually got something here that I can use. I can raise awareness, I can raise funds, I can can do something with this. So I very much went into practical mode. I contacted my lovely friend, Nicola Rowley, who's a lovely friend, but she's also a PR guru. And so I thought, well, she'll be the person to advise me on what to do. And one of the first things she said was, okay, you need to create a blog, start a blog, and think about doing a podcast, because those two things are going to get awareness. They're going to get you seen by an audience. So I started the blog almost immediately, the Annie Bennett Chronicles. And then from that, I started thinking about the podcast, what that would entail and what I would focus on, and also the charity as well. Because to start with, I wanted to fundraise. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to fundraise for another charity or for my own. But as the days and weeks went on, I decided that actually I wanted to create my own. I want to create a legacy that carries on when eventually I'm not here. I decided to set up the Chronicles of Hope charity, and the aim of it is to support young adults. Now, my daughters were 20 and 23 when I got my diagnosis, and it occurred to me that actually there's lots of help out there for children, quite rightly, when their parents are diagnosed, and for teenagers, but perhaps not so much for over 18s. They need financial help. They need help with petrol, for example. My girls were taking me all over the place to hospital appointments and blood appointments and scans and all sorts of things. And they even had to have time off work to do that. So, as well as the emotional support that's needed at that time, some financial support would have been welcomed as well. You know, luckily we have a wider family that did help us, but it occurred to me that of course not everyone does. There will be young adults out there who are dealing with this situation, who have no one else to rely on or fall back on. And this is where the Chronicles of Hope charity will step in and give that help. So that is what I'm in the process of setting up now. It's going to probably be a CIC, a kick, rather than a charity, because the setup will suit what we want to do. But the aim of it will be exactly the same. We'll be able to give financial help and emotional support to those young adults. So to conclude this episode, it has been, as you can imagine, quite a traumatic few months, quite an intense few months, but also I have been filled with this sense of purpose and productivity because of the hope that I have that I want to leave a legacy. Now, I'm going to finish off each episode with a thought, and when I have my guest episodes, I will ask them this very question, that if they have one message of hope for others, what would it be? And mine is that although I've been diagnosed with a life-limiting illness, I am not by any means going to limit my life. I shall live in the here and now with no more of that, oh, one day I'd like to do this, or one day I'd like to do that. That one day is today, and I shall be using that as wisely as I can and productively as I can. So until next time, thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to the Chronicles of Hope podcast with me, Annie Bennett. I hope you found inspiration, comfort, or perhaps even a newfound perspective around the meaning of hope. To find out more about the aims of the Chronicles of Hope organisation, please visit www.thechroniclesofhope.org, where you will find links to our social media accounts and where you will be able to make a much needed and appreciated donation. Thank you.